Your father needs comfort care only, Emily. The treatments you're pushing for are just cruel at this point. My Aunt Margaret's voice echoed through the hospital corridor as I stood outside Dad's room, my hands shaking with barely controlled anger. My name is Emily Chen, and at 35, I found myself fighting a battle I never expected, protecting my comatose father from his own sister. Dad had suffered a severe stroke 3 weeks ago, and while the doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery, Aunt Margaret had other ideas. The doctors say he's responding to treatment, I argued, clutching Dad's medical file to my chest. His numbers are improving. Margaret's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively in the air. Doctors say lots of things, dear, but as his sister, I know what Thomas would want. He wouldn't want to live like this. I bit back a sharp retort. Margaret had barely spoken to Dad in the past 5 years, not since he'd refused to invest in her husband's latest business scheme. Now suddenly she was an expert on his wishes. I have medical power of attorney, I reminded her firmly. Dad made his wishes very clear. About that, Margaret's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Are you sure about those documents? Things can get so complicated with legal paperwork. A chill ran down my spine. Something in her tone set off warning bells. That evening, as I reviewed Dad's chart with his primary nurse, Sarah, something felt off. The treatment protocol had subtle changes I didn't remember authorizing. When was this pain medication increased? I asked, pointing to the chart. Sarah frowned, checking her notes. Yesterday afternoon, your aunt brought in updated directives from the family lawyer. Said you were too overwhelmed to handle things right now. My blood ran cold. I never authorized that. I'm the only one with power of attorney. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to concern. She had documents, Emily. They looked legitimate, but she hesitated, then lowered her voice. I've been keeping my own detailed notes. Some things haven't felt right. I leaned forward. What kind of things? Your aunt has been having a lot of private conversations with different staff members, giving slightly different versions of your father's wishes. She told one nurse you had agreed to transition to hospice care, told another you were stepping back from medical decisions due to emotional stress, but when I asked to see written confirmation from you, she always had an excuse. My hands clenched into fists. Show me everything. Sarah pulled out a small notebook from her scrub pocket. Her personal notes detailed every interaction with Margaret over the past week, times, dates, specific conversations. But what caught my eye was an entry from 2 days ago. She was on the phone in your father's room. Sarah had written, didn't know I was within earshot. Something about insurance policies and inheritance laws. Said Emily doesn't need to know yet. Just make sure those papers look legitimate. The pieces started falling into place. Dad's insurance policy, his investments, the beach house he'd inherited from our grandparents, everything would pass to me as his only child. Unless, I need copies of every document my aunt has brought in, I told Sarah, and I need to speak with hospital administration immediately. There's something else, Sarah added, her voice barely above a whisper. The new pain medication protocol she pushed through. It's unusually aggressive for someone at your father's stage of recovery. If continued at these doses, she didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew what excessive pain medication could do to a patient in Dad's condition. Margaret hadn't just fabricated documents. She was actively trying to worsen Dad's condition while maintaining the appearance of acting in his best interest. As I rushed to the hospital administrator's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, dropping by the hospital later to discuss Thomas's care plan changes. I really think it's best if you start accepting the inevitable, dear. The inevitable. She was so confident in her plan, she didn't even bother hiding her intentions anymore. But she didn't know about Sarah's notes. She didn't know I had proof of her deception, and she certainly didn't know that I'd already called Dad's real lawyer, who was very interested to hear about these supposedly legitimate documents. Looking back at Dad's room, where he lay fighting for his life, I made a silent promise. Margaret had underestimated me, thinking I was too emotionally overwhelmed to notice her manipulation. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. First I needed to protect Dad, then I would uncover exactly how deep my aunt's deception went, and make sure she never came near my father again. The hospital administrator's office was quiet, except for the sound of papers being shuffled as Dr. Roberts, the chief of medicine, reviewed Sarah's notes and the suspicious documents Margaret had submitted. This is deeply concerning, he said, looking up at me over his reading glasses. These authorization forms appear legitimate at first glance, but there are inconsistencies. The notary stamp, for instance, it's dated 3 months ago. but this particular format was only implemented by the state last month. I felt a mix of relief and rage. So they're definitely forged. Without question, he pressed a button on his desk phone. Please send security to my office immediately. Turning back to me, he continued. We're implementing a complete lockdown on your father's care decisions. From now on, any changes to his treatment must have your in-person authorization and secondary verification from myself or the charge nurse. As we spoke, my phone kept buzzing with messages from Margaret. On my way to discuss the hospice transfer. Called the insurance company for you. So helpful once I explained the situation. Think about what your father would want, dear. Each message made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. The police were on their way, and I needed to handle this carefully. Sarah appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Miss Chen, your aunt just arrived. She's headed to your father's room, with someone she says is from the hospice care center. Dr. Roberts stood immediately. Security is on their way up. Emily, stay here while we know. I interrupted. I need to face her. I need to hear her explain herself. When I reached Dad's room, Margaret was already there, with a woman in business casual attire, speaking in her most authoritative voice. Yes, we'll need to begin the transfer process immediately. My niece is simply too emotional to see what's best for her father. Really, Aunt Margaret? My voice cut through the room like ice. Tell me more about what's best for Dad. She spun around, barely maintaining her composure. Emily dear, I was just explaining to Miss Porter here about the hospice arrangements we discussed. We never discussed hospice care, I said firmly, just like we never discussed the forged documents you submitted, or the unauthorized changes to his medication. For a split second, Margaret's mask slipped, and I saw something dark flash across her face, but she quickly recovered, turning to the woman beside her. You see what I mean? She's in denial about her father's condition. This is exactly why I had to step in. Step in. I pulled out my phone, opening my email. Like you stepped in with Dad's insurance company. I have an interesting email here from his agent. Apparently someone claiming to be his power of attorney, called to discuss early payout options and beneficiary changes. Margaret's face paled slightly, but she held her ground. I was simply exploring all the options, looking out for the family's best interests. The family's best interests. I laughed bitterly. Like you looked out for Dad's interests when he wouldn't invest in Robert's pyramid scheme, or when you tried to convince Grandma to cut him out of her will. That's ancient history, she snapped, her composed facade cracking. This is about Thomas's care now. No, this is about money. It's always been about money with you. I turned to the woman beside her. Miss Porter, I assume you'd like to see the legitimate power of attorney documents, the ones that haven't been forged. Before anyone could respond, hospital security arrived, followed by Dr. Roberts and 2 police officers. Margaret Windsor, one officer stepped forward. We need to speak with you about some questionable documents that have been submitted to this hospital. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Margaret's carefully constructed mask of concern completely shattered. She lunged toward Dad's IV stand, reaching for the medication pump, screaming something about putting him out of his misery. Security grabbed her before she could touch anything, but her true intentions were finally laid bare for everyone to see. The woman who'd claimed to be looking out for her brother's best interests had just tried to harm him in front of multiple witnesses. As the police led her away in handcuffs, she kept screaming about ungrateful families and wasted inheritances. The composed, manipulative aunt who'd nearly succeeded in her deception was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Later that evening, as I sat by Dad's bedside, Sarah came in to check his vitals. His numbers are actually improving, she said softly. Now that he's back on the correct medication protocol, we're seeing positive changes. I held Dad's hand, watching his peaceful breathing. Thank you, I told her. If you hadn't kept those detailed notes, she smiled. Always trust a nurse's instincts. We see more than people realize. My phone buzzed with a message from Dad's lawyer. Police found evidence on Margaret's computer, multiple forged documents, emails to insurance companies, even draft obituaries. They're building a strong case. I looked at Dad's face, seeing the color returning to his cheeks now that he was receiving proper treatment. Margaret had underestimated both of us, his will to live, and my determination to protect him. But this wasn't over yet. We still had to uncover the full extent of her plans, and ensure she could never harm anyone else's family member under the guise of helping. The next few weeks revealed the true depths of Margaret's deception. The police investigation uncovered a pattern that went far beyond my father's case. We found similar scenarios at 3 other hospitals. Detective Phillips explained, spreading files across the table in the hospital conference room. Your aunt appears to have targeted multiple family members of former business associates, always using the same approach: forged medical documents, claims of power of attorney, and gradual manipulation of care protocols. I felt sick reading through the cases. 2 elderly cousins, a former business partner of her husband's, and even her own mother-in-law, all had experienced mysterious declines, while under Margaret's self-appointed care. How did no one catch this before? I asked. She was careful, the detective replied. Used different hospitals, spaced the cases out over years. Plus she had insider knowledge from her husband's time as a medical equipment supplier. She knew exactly how to work the system. The investigation also revealed something that made my blood run cold: detailed notes about my father's insurance policies, retirement accounts, and properties. Margaret had mapped out exactly how his assets would be distributed in the event of his death, including several scenarios where she could contest my inheritance. Your father's signature appears on some recent documents, Detective Phillips added, sliding over a folder. We've confirmed they're forgeries, but they would have caused significant legal complications if she had succeeded in killing him. The words hung unspoken in the air. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah poked her head in, her face bright with excitement. Emily, you need to come quickly. Your father's awake. I ran to Dad's room, my heart pounding. He was sitting up slightly, his eyes open and alert. When he saw me, he smiled weakly and squeezed my hand. The doctors say it's remarkable, Sarah explained as she checked his vitals. Once we restored his original treatment protocol, his recovery accelerated significantly. Margaret's medication changes had been actively suppressing his improvement. Dad couldn't speak much yet, but he could communicate through writing. His first message broke my heart. Knew something wrong. Couldn't warn you. Maggie kept changing meds. He had been aware, at least partially, of what his sister was doing to him. The thought of him lying there, unable to protect himself while Margaret slowly poisoned him, filled me with renewed anger. The district attorney's office moved quickly with the prosecution. Margaret's carefully maintained image crumbled as evidence mounted against her. Former hospital staff came forward with stories of manipulation and coercion. Financial records showed suspicious patterns of inheritance from other deceased family members. Robert, her husband, filed for divorce after discovering the extent of her crimes. I knew she was obsessed with money, he told the prosecutors, but I never thought she'd go this far. During her arraignment, Margaret finally showed her true colors. Gone was the concerned sister act, replaced by bitter accusations and threats. They all owed me, she screamed in the courtroom. I deserved that money. Emily doesn't appreciate what she has. Thomas always favored her. As she was led away, I realized the truth. This had never really been about money. It was about control, about punishing those who didn't give her what she thought she deserved. Dad's recovery progressed steadily. Physical therapy helped him regain strength, and speech therapy helped him find his voice again. The first full sentence he spoke was, "Thank you for fighting for me." 6 months later, Margaret pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. The judge showed no mercy, citing her calculated abuse of trust and complete lack of remorse. As I sat in the courtroom hearing her sentence, 25 years without possibility of parole, I felt no satisfaction, only relief that she couldn't hurt anyone else. Dad insisted on making a victim impact statement, his voice still slightly shaky, but growing stronger with each word. "My sister didn't just try to take my life," he said. "She tried to steal my daughter's trust and family, her faith in the medical system, her peace of mind. But she failed. Instead, she showed us the true meaning of family, not the ones who claim authority over us, but the ones who fight to protect us." Later that evening, as Dad and I sat in his garden watching the sunset, something we'd feared we'd never do again, he handed me an envelope. "Updated my will and medical directives," he said with a small smile. "No room for confusion this time." Also added a clause about Sarah. "She gets a nice thank you for those detailed notes that saved my life." I hugged him, thankful for second chances, and the people who help us fight for them. Margaret's simple misunderstanding had nearly destroyed our family, but in the end it had only made us stronger. The truth always finds its way to the light, especially when there are people brave enough to document it, fight for it, and stand by it, no matter what the cost.